I'm Tony, and today we're going to make a pine tree. A foundation paper pieced pine tree to be exact. If you haven't yet picked up this pattern, it is only $2 on my website, and I'm going to take you step by step, all of the instructions, and show you how to put this together. So let's sew. For our tree, step number 1, you want to take a look at the instructions. Read through all of the instructions step by step by step. And make sure when you print them out, you print out page number 10. Now, I have printed this onto special foundation paper piecing paper. You can use regular printer paper. Just make sure that whenever you are sewing, you lower your stitch length to a 1.6. That is extremely important, a 1.6 stitch length, and that will make sure that you can easily take off this paper from your pattern. Now, this one's actually a pretty easy pattern. As you see, there are a whole bunch of different sections, but you're really just creating these and then sewing them together. This is actually a semi-beginner pattern, so it's pretty easy to do it. So resizing. This is our little 1 inch, so we want to take our ruler. If you want a 6-inch block, you print this so that this is exactly 1 inch, and it is. Now, if you want to make a bigger or smaller block, you use percentages. So let's say if I want to make a 12-inch block, well then print this at 200% for your printer, and your 1 inch should be 2 inches because you've doubled the size. If you want to make it half the size, so let's say if you want a 3-inch finished block, at that point you want to reduce it by 50%, and this should measure a 1/2 inch because you've reduced it by half. So it's all a matter of the percentages that you print it. Now, if you do print this, obviously at a bigger percent, then you may cut some of this off. So what I normally do is I take it to a copy machine, and then I copy it and use the 200%, and then I can take this and copy the different areas and then blow the areas up that way. So now, once you've got your paper to the size that you want, we need to cut out our pieces of paper. Whenever you're cutting these out, do not cut along the dotted lines, because that is how our trim lines are going to be. So when you're cutting out your paper, cut it out around your dotted lines and all the way down. After you finish cutting your paper out, then we cut our fabric. Now, I am cutting, I chose a different fabric than the original pattern. I'm actually using a purple background. So I've got a light purple instead of the blue, just give it a little bit of contrast. I'm also using a darker green, and then the brown, I just grabbed a scrap piece of brown. The nice thing about foundation paper piecing is you can use up a bunch of scraps if you like. So after you finish cutting out your papers, the next step is cutting out your fabric. So as you can see, I've printed out what I need from here, so that I'll take my pencil and I will, after I finish cutting my pieces, I'll mark them off. And then what I'll do to make it better organized, after I cut out my pieces, I'll match my fabric pieces up with my paper pieces. So I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the camera, but what I'll be doing off to the side is I'll be taking my A and setting it there, and then after I cut them, put them on there, and same thing with the B, and then C, D, C, D, E, F. And it's just going to make it a lot easier to organize it this way. So that's what I'll do next. So I'm going to cut all of my fabrics. I'm going to speed up the video, and then after I cut all the fabrics, I will come back and I will show you the first step of getting everything started. All of our fabric is cut out. So now let's place our A1 fabric. So I like to use a glue stick for this first step. It just makes it so much easier. I'm just going to take this and just put this over on the A1 and then center it. Now when you center this, you center it over the A1. Don't worry about if you cover that A4 or not. As long as your entire A1 is covered, that's what matters. So then I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold this on the line between A1 and A2 and trim this a 1/4 inch away, just like that. And we're going to open this back up again, and then I'm going to take my A2 fabric and lay it. Now we have to make sure whenever our A2 fabric is opened up, it completely covers all of A2. So that means you have to take this and move it to the right a bit. So you may not cover all, oops, it would help if I actually had this in the camera. You may not cover all of A1. So your A2 fabric should be to the right a bit. And then as you fold this over to test this, make sure it's covering all of the paper of A2. And mine is right here. So let me go ahead and redo that. And then I'll pin it. There we are. There we are. All right, so there is our A1. So I'm going to take this aside, and we're going to do the same exact thing for all of the other ones. So I'm adding in the number 1. So in this case, I'm adding in B1. I'm going to fold it over, trim it, bring it back. Oh, and I forgot to mention, whenever you're gluing this, it is wrong side to wrong side. So as you see, that's the right side of my fabric. That's the wrong side of my fabric. So glue it to the wrong side of the fabric. And then fold, trim, open, and place B2. Just the same thing. So I'm going to go through and do all of the 1s and 2s for all of these, and then we'll come back and I will show you how to sew them. Alright, we have all of our 1s and 2s on our papers. So at this point, we're going to sew between the 1 and the 2 in order to put them both on there. Don't forget, lower your stitch length to a 1.6. It will make it much, much easier to take that paper out. In the case of the A, for A1 and 2, you want to make sure to start off the paper and sew on that line, and then go beyond the line about a 1/4 inch, and then stop. Don't go all the way through because we're not worried about sewing that A4. We're only concerned about sewing that line between the 1 and the 2, but we want to make sure that we have at least a 1/4 inch on either side. And that's going to help lock it in whenever you're adding additional pieces. So this one is done. So that's all I'm doing at this point now, is sewing between that 1 and that 2. Alright, we've got them sewn, so now we're going to iron them. Now, whenever you're ironing it, feel free to use steam. I am a big fan of using steam whenever I am foundation paper piecing. Just keep in mind when you're using steam, you're going to curl that paper. You see how that paper is? You're going to curl the paper. That is fine. Now, you notice I missed a corner here. So let me see if I can iron this. There we are. I didn't iron it correctly. Now it covers that corner. Because you want to make sure that you cover that paper completely with that fabric. Now that little tiny little tip is okay because it's the tiny tip that is not within that dashed line. So you have to make sure the entire dashed line is going to be covered. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just going to be ironing and then setting it aside. Now, make sure when you're ironing this, you're ironing it towards the piece that you just sewed. So iron it towards the two. Always, always iron towards the piece that you have added, unless you're joining units. In that case, we're going to be ironing open, and I will be showing you how to do it when we get there. Alright, so now we've got the twos on there. Let's add our threes. So our threes are going to be the same thing. All we're doing, so this is the F. So all we're doing is we are doing the same thing, but on the other side. So we're folding along the line. I'm trimming. Opening it, flipping this over, and then adding the F on. And then adding the F3 on. So we've got our ones and twos, and now we're adding threes. With this pattern, you're always starting with the one, adding the two, and then adding the three. So I'll be doing that with all of these. I'm going to be doing the same thing as I did with that first step. So after I finish putting the threes all on, I'm going to sew them, and then I will iron them. I will show you all those steps, but I'm going to speed it up super, super fast so we can get on to the next one, which is adding the fours to both A and F. Oop, this way. There we are. That's the way that I want to go with this one. All right. Alright, so let's do A1 and A4. Or, I'm sorry, A4 and F4. Alright, so with this one, I forgot to show you this past time. Whenever you go to fold this, there are stitches here because you've stitched into here. So what you want to do is pull very gently and make sure that you pull away the paper, but leaving the stitches in there. If you want to remove those little bits of paper right now, you can using your tweezers, or you can wait and just do that later. So after you pull the paper away, then you fold it down along A2, A1, A3, and A4. And then we're going to trim this 1/4 inch from A4 to then add our last one. So let's open this up. And then here is our A4 fabric. So it just lays right across, just like that. And because it's sewn in the middle, I always like to start pinning it from the middle, and then I can do everything else all the way out. And all the way out. So then I'll do the same thing to F, and then I'll be sewing this, starting it here, going all the way down, and then coming back and ironing both of these, and then we will start putting all of our units together. All of our units are done. Now we want to trim them. So we're going to take each of our units, and I'm taking my paper rotary cutter. Notice how for my rotary cutters, I use 2 different handles, so I know that this is fabric, this is paper, and then that way I don't have that issue. All right, so we're going to trim. Now I'm going to trim along, whoops. I'm going to trim along the dotted lines. So you can either measure a 1/4 inch from the solid line, or just cut along that dotted line, because that dotted line is a 1/4 inch from the solid line. There we are. Pieces are trimmed. So now we just need to start assembling. So I'm going to take the bottom ones and then flip them up over the top ones. Now, as long as it is centered, you are fine. So try to line these up and center them as much as possible before you pin them. And then whenever I sew them, I'm going to sew along the line, which is going to give me my 1/4 inch seam whenever I'm sewing my units together. So there's my E and my F unit. So let me flip the D over the C. Whenever I do any kind of sewing, I find just taking the bottom and flipping the bottom over the top just makes it so much easier. Now, the nice thing about this pattern is there's nothing you have to check ahead of time. There's nothing for lining up. There's none of that stuff. All you've got to worry about is it lined up and pretty much centered as much as possible. There we go. And that's it. So let's go over and let's sew these. Now, whenever I sew these, there's no additional fabric before and after. So I'm going to use my leader fabric. So I'm going to put this in here. This is my chain piecing leader ender fabric. So I put that in there. And then I want to sew along my lines. There we are. We just put in one right after the other. And then after all 3 are sewn, I'm going to take that leader ender fabric for the chain piecing off and put it in the back to free it. Chain piecing is a great way to secure your threads without having to go back and go back and forth on it. It is also saves some time. All right, let's iron these. All right, when we iron these, I always like to start it by ironing it to one side, but these seams, we want to make sure that we iron them open. Whenever you're joining 2 different units together, it's always a good idea to make sure those seams are ironed open. All right, so let's iron this as much as we can. And then I'm going to open this up again. Now, if this is too hot for your fingers, I don't have any touch sense heat related in my fingers anymore because I was a server for many years. There's also a few tools out there that Clover makes that allows you to press this open so you don't have to use your fingers. But you want to press that open and then iron it. So our seams are going open. Now make sure as soon as you iron it to the one side, you open this up right away because it's warm. It's easy to get that seam opened, just like that. And last but not least, Now again, it doesn't make a difference which way you iron to get it started, because the seam is going to eventually be open. Just like that. Alright, so now we have all 3 of our units. We're going to start assembling unit to unit. So I'm going to take my EF unit, I'm going to assemble it to the CD unit. So I'm going to pin this, sew this, iron this, add on the AB, pin it, sew it, iron it, and then we'll come back after speeding up the video and I will show you the last steps. And our block is done. And there is our pine tree. Alright, so at this point you want to remove all of your papers. I like to fold it a little bit before pulling it out. You see how, if you've watched my other foundation paper piecing videos, you notice how this paper is tearing out a lot easier and nicer than the other papers. That's because I said at the beginning I am using special paper that is meant for foundation paper piecing. So if you don't have special paper, like I said, you can use your normal copy paper. You just need to be a little bit more slower and careful about it. Also, make sure you have your favorite tweezers on hand. Mine are the Famore 507s. If you click on the link down below and type in 507, you'll get these tweezers. They have an angled head and they're super sharp to get in there and get all of those papers. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my papers out, use my tweezers to grab the little bits of paper that are left behind, and then I'll come back and show you what to do after getting the paper out. Now, you are going to get little tiny bits of paper. See, just like that? That is why we use our tweezers and we pull it away. So make sure that you take a look at it, get out all of your little bits of paper. And once that's out, we can do our last step. So what we want to do is we want to now iron it, because getting all those bits of paper out there has almost gotten rid of all of our seams. So we're going to re-iron our seams now on the back. Get some steam going. Once that's done, I'm going to re-iron this on the front, making sure this is all the way out, because then our last step is we're going to square our block up. So square it up to the size that you got. Mine is a 6.5 inch block because it's going to be a 6-inch finished block. Now, all of the patterns that I make sure there's plenty of border on the outside. So if you want to cut this up a little bit more and make it a little bit smaller, you can. So you can even trim it down to 6 inches to make a 5.5 inch block. And let's trim there and there. Wow, my block is basically already at 6.5. There's nothing to trim. So there is our pine tree block. And that's a tree. Look at my pretty trees! So hopefully this video helped you step by step making this tree. If not, if you have any questions, concerns, please feel free to comment below. I'd be more than happy to help you. And yeah, we have trees. Hopefully you liked this video. If so, please like the video, follow my YouTube as well as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, my Quite Nerded Quilters Facebook group, Twitch, Pinterest, TikTok, all the things. All the things. And don't forget to join me when I am live. So I stream live both on YouTube and Twitch. My schedule is always on my Facebook social media. And yeah, have a fantastic day.